call to no, all right, call to order meeting of the zoning bylaw working group for July 6, 2022. Thank you everybody for being here. We are what I would call the last persons standing of the committee. The first thing I want to talk about, I hope everybody got the agenda I circulated, and it's not as daunting as it seems. I'm going to take minutes as we go through the different things. So let me just make a note of who's here. Me, Cassandra. So this board has not met since April, and then for various reasons, Peter, Woody, and Katie have resigned, and our second planning board representative did not stand for re-election. So 4 of our members were gone. The select board, Jack's not here to confirm this, but the select board is planning to take this board out of the umbrella of the Master Plan Implementation Committee and make it a direct report to the selectmen. We were all appointed by the select board. I still can't get used to it, but we were appointed by the select board, but we're under the umbrella of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Now we will continue to be appointed by the select board and serve at their pleasure. And my understanding is that on Tuesday's meeting, they are meeting tomorrow night, but I don't think they're going to deal with this tomorrow night. But for Tuesday's meeting, they're going to make some appointments to this board and reconstitute it. Presumably that's all of us included, but they are going to reconstitute the board. And I know Cassie had mentioned a couple of people. I know Dave McMorris has expressed interest. Dave Farag has expressed interest. We're not going to be, what the process is going to be that they're not going to tie it too much to specific board representation. For example, I have solicited open space. There's no one really interested in filling Peter's seat. There's no one on the zoning board interested in serving. So, the issue has come up at the planning board too with our liaison assignments that there's issues with people serving on multiple boards just having the time frame to deal with it all. So we're going to probably have only citizen members coming on board. So pay attention to the select board meeting on Tuesday to see if any of us are here for the next meeting. But nevertheless, given the schedule,
related to that, isn't there a zoning advisory committee outlined in the general bylaws?
I don't recall that that's in the bylaws, but that committee hasn't met in years. And I think this was intended, this committee was given a specific charge of a rewrite. So I don't think that committee has existed in a long, long time. So, and I don't think it's in the general bylaws that I recall, but you could be right. But, it's the select board's pleasure to create these and not create these and populate these boards. So we'll just have.
It was definitely outlined somewhere.
Yeah, it was the master plan that you and I were involved in for 2004 is where that process started, because people were getting a little concerned that, for those of you who don't know, the master plan in 2004 was never officially adopted by the planning board, but there was 5 of us, Clark and myself included, known as the Gang of 5, and we promoted a lot of the master plan to town meeting. And over the course of 2004 to 2007, a number of things got passed. And as a result of that, the powers that be decided to create a zoning advisory committee to sort of be another vetting instrument, but it hasn't met in years. All right, so we'll wait to see what the select board does with this committee on Tuesday. But nevertheless, important for us to go forward just because of the schedule of things that things we need to do. Fall town meeting is scheduled for early December, Lauren, right now. Is that the tentative date? So
it's a tentative one of the first 2 Mondays in December.
Yeah, and even with it being that far away, the timeline is such that for the many warrant articles we're proposing, we need to get moving and working on this stuff. Next item, let me just making notes to myself for the minutes, if you don't mind. So is town council.
Jack just joined us, if you haven't noticed.
Oh, okay, Jack. So I was just, Jack,
Oh, here.
I only got on the second item of the agenda and just telling us that, by Tuesday, we're expecting your board to reconstitute this committee as you see fit. And
Yeah,
we will look forward to that, but nevertheless, we can go forward tonight. So I don't know if you want to add anything to it. I mentioned a couple of people who have expressed interest, but again, it's up to you guys what you're going to do. So
right. Yeah,
um,
just so everybody knows, there's some things, in reconstituting and making it clear that what we need to do, but you already know what we need to do is to do that. And there's been some clarifying the qualifications, so we're not looking for a committee to put a member on this and they don't have somebody. So we're just simplifying it and make it clear that it's a advisory committees reporting to the select board. And just so you know, you guys have tremendous support from the select board. This is important stuff. We've already given you the resources to get directly access town council. And they brought in some of their KP law specialist, Judge Cutler. So anyway, you have our support. Go for it.
thank you, Jack.
And
All right.
I will remain as the select board liaison, which signifies to you how important we think that is.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so item 3 is town council and what their role is going to be. Up to this point, the working group has done most of its work. Well, I shouldn't say most, all of it.
I think you need to
Except
switch
for
to your
maybe
iPhone.
occasion- Why?
I think the
You're
your mic
binging.
is a little
Oh,
foggy.
shit. All right, hold on a second.
Sometimes you sound good, but then you
All right,
go
well,
cut out.
all right, let me just see. I'll get on with the iPhone in the meantime. But anyway, so most of the work by the working group, we're close to, I think, 2 years since it's been working. It has been done its own, excuse me, on its own. We've done our own research. We've had great work in that regard with some of our members, Cassie in particular, Woody.
I think we lost
A
Tom.
lot of research.
No, we're not getting your stuff.
Yeah. Tom, maybe try to turn your video off. So it might be a Wi-Fi strength issue.
That's a good idea.
It might turn my what off?
If you turn stop your video, sometimes it's just your Wi-Fi is not strong enough to
Bandwidth's
have
not-
audio.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right, is that better?
that is better.
All right, well, you don't have to look at my pretty face. Isn't that good for all of you? So anyway, so a couple of Mondays ago, I had a Zoom meeting with Carolyn Murray, our town council, and one of her partners is Judge Judith Cutler. She's a retired judge of the land court. She has an expertise in working with bylaws, writing with bylaws, and obviously dealing with appeals of cases brought before her under bylaws. So the two of them are going to be working with us, with Carolyn as our primary point of contact. They are not here tonight. Obviously, Carolyn's schedule, not only does she represent our town, she represents others. So when we're not meeting with our board tonight, she's meeting with somebody else's planning board tonight. So we agreed that they are going to certainly be behind the scenes, reading, editing, suggesting changes. I'm counting very much on their representation of other towns to bring us ideas from other towns. They will come to meetings as needed. They will answer direct questions. Those questions should be rooted to me. And They will be obviously present at town meeting. They'll be present when we get to the planning board statutory hearings. And I am expecting that they'll be in attendance when we have our public forum that we'll get to in a little bit. So they are on board as a full partner with us. Just for words of caution, we clarified this at our last planning board meeting. Judge Cutler is to be referred to as Judge Cutler. We can use first names with Carolyn, but we are not using first names with Judge Cutler.
Good to know.
So she's going to get to make sure. We attorneys still have to call them Your Honor and Judge, even if they're retired. But calling her Cutler will.
Hey, Tom, you're still breaking up a little, and
So
it's hard
I'm
to
very
tell.
Excited with.
It's hard to tell because we don't have the video to see when you freeze.
All right, all right, give me a minute here. I'll keep talking, but I'll try to get. I got to get on my Zoom here. So.
I'm still here, guys. I'm just eating dinner, but I'll be back on camera in a little while.
Like a piece of spinach right there.
I'm like, you guys don't want to watch me eat, so.
My apologies, guys. I don't know why this is all of a sudden going haywire. You know, this is the way I do Zoom with court, so it's going to be a problem. God almighty, this is trying.
Well, I'm going to send you the link so it's top of your email, Tom, on your iPhone.
No, I'm just getting onto the town page to get it. Anyway, so town council is with us, and we're going to have that resource for us going forward. All right. On the item 4, you
And so,
got a
Tom, town council and Judge Cutler's role will be what?
All right. We are going to be, we're working off the draft that I created a long time ago as a starting point. Okay. They are going to.
This is regarding the zoning bylaw rewrite and reorg.
The text of the bylaw itself. And they are going to edit, comment, suggest changes. A recent example is, we've been in the planning board recently discussing a new regulation, and town council gave us, took the document, made edits and comments in the margins. That's probably how we will get a lot of their work product. And we will get them in person as we need them and as they're available. So they're going to be, they're not writing the first draft, but they're going to be intensely involved in writing the final text of this, as well as all of us are. So,
and so are you going to be sending, sorry, I'm just asking a lot of questions. Are you going to be sending your draft and giving them like a timeline of
everything I've circulated to you, they have.
Okay, and they're going to come back with their feedback.
They actually had it. Yeah, they actually had it a week before you. They've been looking at it, I assume. I haven't heard anything from them yet, but after tonight, I'm going to remind them of our next assignment and where we're.
Do you think that they'll take the time of like our next meeting collectively, and they can hop on and walk through their comments together? Or are they just going to send it back and forth through email?
Well, our next meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks, and it depends on their availability, and it depends on, I guess, the extent of their comments. So we'll deal with that as we go along. They can't commit to coming to every meeting, but their schedules representing other towns as well as ours. So,
but maybe if we set the expectation, 2 weeks, we'd love to review what you have so far. Is that a possibility? So we just set the expectation.
Again, they have everything, so they have the same homework assignment for 2 weeks from now that everybody else is going to have. I'm just waiting to get in on my phone. Oh, there we go. All right.
So you'll probably just have to start mute the other one.
So I'm gonna.
There's 3 of. Oh no, it's.
All right, I'm gonna should I mute?
You're an echo. You,
Oh yeah, turn off the phone volume if you want, just your computer volume.
I've never had this problem. Should I,
you've
Should
got
I
an
leave?
echo. Can you
Turn
hear an
on,
echo?
put your phone on mute.
Here, ready?
can't-
Yep.
Yeah, now your computer's on mute, I guess.
all right, is that
Yeah.
better? I don't know.
Shouldn't he talk through his cell phone?
How can I?
Stronger signal?
Oh, yeah, I guess you could do the opposite. I think Clark's
I
great.
leave the meeting through. I think-
But then will it kick us all off because you're the host?
No, I'm the host.
Oh, okay,
Try
perfect.
talking just through your cell phone and mute your
Mhm.
mute your laptop. Since that was the
Yeah, flip it.
that signal was the problem.
You're right, Clark.
Unmute your phone.
He didn't join the audio.
Can
Sorry,
you,
left.
I don't know why is there this echo?
Okay, that doesn't sound good.
It's because your computer audio is on and your phone is picking it up and feeding it back in.
Oh, so maybe turn the volume on your computer off,
What if
not
we
just
just
the mic.
what if we just kicked out the computer version?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
should
kick
should
me
do
off
it.
the computer version. Just kick me off.
All
Yeah.
right, I'm taking you out.
You actually sound okay now.
Better?
Say something, Tom. Say something.
Hello, hello.
Sound
Okay.
good. Sound good. Woo.
Good thus
All right.
far.
We're back in business.
All right, so anyway, I'm just not, I'm not gonna be able to share documents, so you guys got everything, so I hope you have it at the fingertips if you need to see it. So you got a memo, which was in large part written for people who aren't on the committee before to just orient where we are. We've done a lot of work in 2 years. We've done a lot of benchmarking with other towns. We've a lot of research on possible substantive changes to our dimensional regs, and we have a lot of backup and justification for going forward. But we are at the point, we left off at the point in April where we had pretty much set on a reorganization and a housekeeping, and taking the bylaw, which currently has 22 articles. Originally it was down to 10. I've put it into 9 because it can be consolidated even further. And the model for the organization is the Concord bylaw. And I think Judge Cutler noted, I think she lives in Concord, so she was very pleased we were following the Concord model. We were left in April with our next assignments. We're going to be starting to get into the different articles and into the actual text. So that's where we're picking up here. To what you have been given by me is each. So, well, let's say what we did is we created the new table of contents, and you have the table of contents with 9 articles. Down from our current 22. Actually, we have 22 numbered articles, but 2 of them are no longer in effect. So we have 20 articles at the moment. We've taken all the sections and articles and moved them into this new structure. And basically, the articles that the town has added over the years that are numbers 14 and higher have different variations of use articles, sometimes dimensional articles. And we're just consolidating a lot of things here and just making it more logically organized and perhaps more user-friendly. One of the other consensuses we reached about organization was to take a lot of material that's duplicative throughout the bylaw on application procedures and move that out into regulations so that we can adapt more quickly to changes in the state of the art. Everybody should be working on electronic submissions nowadays. I just had to file with the Rockland Zoning Board and the old fashioned, give them 13 copies of everything. So, as things change in the way materials are being applied for, we can more quickly adapt them than have them in a bylaw. Um, the things of substance like timelines for decisions that state law requires us to have would stay in the bylaw. So we're not taking out all the administrative stuff, but where administrative stuff can be removed, we'd like to remove them into regulations. The other thought about regulations was that to put all the regulations of all the land use boards in a single volume, so again, on the user friendliness idea. And the federal government does this. It's called the Code of Federal Regulations. Massachusetts does it. It's the Code of Massachusetts Regulations, where every executive agency in Massachusetts has a particular section, and that's where you find all their regulations of that agency. We would do the same. Code of Cohasset Regulations, Concom, zoning, planning, sewer, water, Board of Health, all be in one place. And each board would administer its own section of that, just as it's done in state government. That hasn't been revealed to the other land use boards yet, but we can get to that. But a lot of duplicative material comes out of the bylaw when we take some of these repetitive administration things out. So we had reached consensus on essentially on organization of this. Now it's time to get into the text. And misplaced my agenda already. I'm sorry. So what you've been given is everything put in a draft form with the exception of a new table of dimensional regulations, area regulations. That is where we have not reached any consensus or any deep dive discussions yet about changes. And this is where you find all the frontage, setback, height, lot coverage, all of that material. And that is, targeted for any articles that deal with those to be spring 23. So, I mean, do I have a draft of one? Yes, but it's a mess right now because we haven't really reached any consensus, but I'm going to put that together. There's just no rush to put it together. But what you have is each of the 9 articles, each of the sections, which is really moving. They are not exclusive, but no other individual members of the committee that I'm aware of have suggested any substantial textual change. The new table of contents, the table of contents for the proposed Code of Regulations. And then I've also distributed to you a proposed town meeting schedule. It has always been the objective of the working group, and I believe in the select board, to get this done by spring 23. We lost some ground by not having anything go forward in spring 22 this year. So the proposed schedule I'm proposing for warrant articles for fall and spring is pretty aggressive, but there was a desire.
We missed that. It was a desire. What?
In 2 steps.
Tom, you cut out. We got desire. There was a desire.
There was a desire to break this up, and rather than pass an entire bylaw all at once, although of course the town did that in 1955. And there's problems in sometimes breaking things up because changes in one part of the bylaw affects other parts of it. But I put together a proposal for bylaw, warrant articles that I think can logically make this work, and make the bylaw still workable and usable while we are in the period between fall town meeting and spring town meeting. We'll go over that in a little more detail in a second. Regarding this committee and its workload, we pretty much have to have things ready for town meeting by September. Lauren and I have discussed that the hearings before the planning board, and for those of you who don't know, anytime there's a zoning bylaw change, major or minor, there has to be a public hearing under state law held by the planning board to publicly vet the articles. And then the planning board makes a recommendation, yay or nay. That's a formal state process we must do. Within our town processes, then we also go before the select board and the advisory committee, and we would in this case go before the zoning board as well for their recommendations. So Lauren and I have discussed that the planning board vetting process would take place in October. The select board and the advisory committee would be November, and then we'd have town meeting either the first or second week of December. So even though December is far off, we have to get working on this. So I put together a schedule that we go every 2 weeks from this night forward, and I realize it's the summertime, and that's an aggressive schedule, but you know, again, we lost some ground not proceeding with anything in this past spring, but I think we can do it. And certainly the focus on the fall town meeting would be to implement the reorganization with, if you've looked at the proposed schedule I had, with a couple of articles on some substantive changes that need more immediate attention. The place where we might have real substantive change would be the table of area regulations, and that wouldn't be done until the spring, as well as any other substantive changes. So I believe we can certainly within our committee be prepared to go forward this fall with the reorganizational changes. And then it's good. Yeah.
Just a quick question about logistics. So the E-code 360, the service that organized our bylaws initially, and then are supposed to give us updates once any bylaw changes, are notoriously slow. And it's hard to find zoning bylaws that have passed that are effective, but haven't been written in. For example, I don't think the changes to 11.3 have been incorporated yet after 6 months. And honestly, I don't know why it would take more than a month to get that, or after the Attorney General gives their thumbs up to get those incorporated within a month. Lauren, do you know anything about the logistics of these guys? Why we have this service and why it takes so long for them to update?
I don't know. I reached out to them to inquire on why that wasn't available yet. It's supposed to have been updated. I don't, honestly, I couldn't tell you what went on with this.
Presumably the town's paying for a subscription, an ongoing service fee. We paid for them to be incorporated in the first place. Now, I would think that what you're talking about doing in terms of the reorganization and mostly not substance would take a complete, it would be like a project for them. I mean, if it's been 6 months and they haven't done the changes to 11.3, what you're talking about, Tom, sounds like could take a couple of years for them to do at their pace. So I think it's going to be very important to find out how quickly they can turn it around so it's all a useful document right away.
Yeah, I share that because in actually doing the rewrite and looking for the land alteration article, I've had to ask Lauren a couple of times to give me the text of it because it wasn't readily available. I think we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We can certainly ask town council.
Well, I mean, I think it would make sense to find out how quickly they can turn it around.
Oh, yeah,
because if it's going to take a year for them to do the rewrite after a town meeting vote, then maybe we just use the old-fashioned version.
Well,
may I interject? Tom and Lauren, why don't you contact me and we'll put together an email and I'll send it from the select board's office to them and ask that question and we'll get the answer.
Sounds good.
They either can do it or they don't.
Yeah, you know, the bylaw becomes official when town meeting passes it and the AG signs off on it. And
Right.
certainly we are going to have versions of it in Word or, you know, around and can post those. You know, if they tell us, well, if you do a change of this magnitude, like, for example, the special town meeting has a proposal for 12 articles here to implement reorganization. If they tell us it's going to take them 6 months to do it, then we'll just have to get an opinion in town council on what we can legally post. But we're certainly going to have official and approved written versions out there, just because it isn't in the E360 format. But E360 seems to have taken over all the towns, and you know, that's apparently the way of the future. But I don't think it.
It doesn't, but it doesn't really work yet.
Yeah, but
So-
it's critical.
So if we can shake the bushes and find out what their logistics are and see
Yeah.
how we can work with that, that'd be great.
My point is their logistics are necessarily our problem to the legality and usability of a new bylaw change. You know, you and I on the planning board are using the new 11.3 anyway, even though it's not on E360 yet. But you know, so
That's right, but nobody else knows about it. I mean, nobody knows to look for it
On the building department page.
in the, yeah.
So maybe I'm just silly because I'm the new person here, but I'm looking at it online on the E360 page. Is that?
Well, it's only gotten there within the last couple of weeks if it's there. It's taken, it did take
Okay.
a while for that change to show up. I think it's just only recently emerged on the E360 site. But again, that's a different issue than the legality and the ability to use a new bylaw. And we'll just get an opinion from council in what form we can put it up online so that the public can see it. It'll certainly be there for everybody to see. And that's the challenge too. And I'm working on putting that together, is that doing this in 2 steps, we're going to have some changes and not other changes. And, you know, so we're going to have a 2-step process that people will see a bylaw that looks like X from December to next May. And then after May, it'll be bylaw Y, which will have additional changes made to it. So, you know, there's no way we can avoid the interim steps in the transition process. There's just no easy way around that.
Yeah, we just need to get a fair assessment on how long it's going to take to get it incorporated, because when it's in limbo, the stuff gets lost. And from a municipal perspective, as well as from a people out in the real world, the outside world.
So just to confirm, it is up there now, which is very exciting news. So they did add it to the E-code website. Also, the town clerk has a contract with E-code for the updating, so I can ask for them to inquire on what this sort of like a big comprehensive overhaul would take in terms of timeline.
Yeah, it's a good idea to get a time frame of it, but it's not going to hold, like I said, that's not going to hold up the legality of changes we make to the bylaw. So,
Yeah, by the way, this brings up an important point. When you have these types of things, rather than discussing them a lot, figure out what the answer that you want. And between Lauren and myself, the reason that this is important, you just let us know, and Lauren will find that out very quickly. And if it requires a call from me from the select board, that tends to move things along. And if it doesn't, we know we really have a problem.
well,
And that way you can spend your time getting this done, and we'll provide you with the support and backup.
well, it sounds like it's also within the, you know, the town clerk is the manager of this contract.
Right.
You know, she's new, but let her do her thing. And all right, so moving along here, item 6, you know, because of the workload, I have thought about quite a bit about how we could subcontract some of the rewrite out to other people or boards. And my suggestions on this is I've always, you know, I have made some changes to the wind and solar sections of the bylaw, which the Alternative Energy Committee wrote a few years ago. those are two bylaws which are a perfect example for the need for reorganization because they set out their own set of definitions. So we have definitions all over the bylaw. They need to be consolidated in one place. They set out a lot of procedural stuff that can go into a regulation and adapt to changes in best practices. But the primary substantive changes I've suggested is to allow for individual well, solar panels are allowed, but it doesn't say in the bylaw they're allowed. I just would add that our solar bylaw deals with large scale facilities, as does our wind bylaw deals with large turbines. And I'm suggesting for a renewable energy future that we add to the bylaw the ability to have small scale turbines on an individual building scale. But since the
You mean
alternative,
turbines or photovoltaics? Do you mean turbines?
yeah, both. Well, anyway, the point was that the Alternative Energy Committee wrote the bylaws. I would send out the proposed changes to them and sub that out to them. Any changes that would come to those two sections of the bylaw would not happen until spring 23. And I just would like to sub it out to them just to lessen our workload over, relatively minor changes to the bylaw. Likewise, the accessory dwelling bylaw has never or rarely been officially used. While we have accessory dwellings in town, it hasn't been used. And for Clark's benefit, the working group has from time to time talked about this and why it hasn't been used. I'm someone in a position with my house that I'd love to use it, but I know it's what holds me up is the septic requirements. So apparently, I think Lauren turned me on to this a couple of weeks ago, that there is a new model accessory dwelling bylaw, and perhaps the town of Arlington has adopted it. So this was another one that I thought sub it out to somebody to look at, and Affordable Housing Committee would be the logical choice, but I have since learned that they're not interested in doing that they're more focused on downsized units that make us count under 40B rather than accessory dwellings, which are not 40B type units. So that may not work, but the accessory, there is a model bylaw out there, a new model bylaw to look at to compare to. So when we get to accessory dwellings, we'll look at that. But
hey, Tom, just on the accessory dwelling, it was made dysfunctional when it first got passed by not allowing any changes to the exterior of a house to create an accessory dwelling. And by removing a phrase from the bylaw, all of a sudden you make it functional again. And it still has a limit of like no more than 10 a year. And then there's a maximum number.
Is that because the community didn't want it at that time? So they made it so that.
I'd hate to point fingers at who made it dysfunctional.
No, not who.
But I think there was some fear. There was
intent?
sort of some fear, like everybody's going to have an apartment in their backyard or whatever. We'll just make it so that you can't change your house. You can't change anything so that no one would know it's there.
the answer,
Which
Cassie,
isn't really practical.
the answer is, Cassie, that an individual was in fear of it and kiboshed it. However, going back to the 2004 master plan, the idea of having accessory dwellings has always been expressed by board members, master plan committees.
Within limits, though, within limits.
Yeah, but no, obviously within limits, and citizens, that it was is an option that we wanted to have in Cohasset. So,
Well, and the 2019 master plan is pretty specific on diversifying housing options. So.
right, I don't want to discuss the merits of it here. That wasn't the point. But the Affordable Housing Committee is apparently not going to be a target to sub this out to.
Yeah,
So
they're capital A.
I think there's a need for flexible housing, and I would say, you could do something like a 6-month permit. I have elderly parents, and I'd like to get them nearby instead of going to a nursing home, and I don't think they're going to live more than a year and a half or 2 years. So, if I could do a 6-month permit and then renew it, and then when I don't need the accessory dwelling anymore, it gets taken away. stuff like
I
that.
think what we also
That
found
makes sense.
for our study, just for some background, is that even if we do make this more amendable and practical, the fact with, everyone's on septic and that dictates the number
Right.
of bedrooms. So
Of course.
it didn't seem like it would
I'm
make a massive change with all these mini apartments popping up.
Time out. The purpose wasn't to discuss the merits of it. We will get to the merits of it, and there's a new model bylaw to look at. But
We only have 40 minutes, Tom.
we will do this in-house because the Affordable Housing Committee will not be a target for subbing it out. Regarding the parking bylaw, now, the working group to date has not talked about substantive change to the parking bylaw. However, in a recent application on Situate Hill, we talked about a policy change and how commercial space is calculated for the number of spaces. And Stantec Clark wouldn't know this, but the rest of the committee knows. We sent out a bid for a consultant to properly help us with public outreach and things, and Stantec was the only one to respond. It wasn't really responsive, but we are keeping Stantec on.
Tom, they didn't even respond. They were the Hail Mary request to
Well,
join.
whatever, all right, but Stantec is staying in the picture for two other things. They are going to be retained, Lauren can explain this further, to do a parking analysis in the village. They're separately going to be retained to start looking at the multifamily requirements the state changes maybe on 3A that are going to dictate what we need to do on 3A. But as part of their review of the village, I thought of throwing into their scope of work. By the way, take a look at our bylaw, particularly the commercial parking requirements of how many square feet per, spaces per square feet, and tell us if it's up to date. I can't recall how long ago that was changed. I know I was in town. I think it was in the early mid 2000s. It might have been the last time it was changed. But I thought about subbing the parking out to Stantec, to just give us your thoughts on our parking bylaw and what changes you see. So if Lauren can work that into the scope, I think we should just take advantage of it since they're going to be studying that.
Would it be useful to at least use the MAPC study, because there was some commentary and feedback about wayfinding and signage. So none of that was ever implemented. I think Stantec would be a little bit more robust in their study, but we paid for that study. We never used it for anything.
Again, the parking is not something the working group has focused on to this point. If parking changes are going to be made, those would be spring 23 changes. So we have the time to decide how we want to deal with parking. We can internally look at the MAPC stuff, or we could just direct Stantec to look at it. But
I was just saying, maybe directing Stantec.
the purpose of this is getting everybody's consensus to sub out work to lessen the workload of our committee. If we can have other expertise do this, my point is just let them do it. The next is Article 7, which is currently our Article 8 of our current bylaw, which is all about the non-conforming lots and uses. And the changes that you'll see in the draft Article 7, some of the changes are near the end of that bylaw that I had proposed in 2005. Language changes based on an application at the time, and it was basically for clarification. It doesn't change substance. It just makes it, I think, easier to read and understand. And that would be changes to sections 8.7 and 8.9. But in the working group, we've also discussed the single lot exemption, which is our current section 8.3. And if you look at the draft of Article 7, in the materials, which we would not, again, this would not be targeted until spring 23. There are, I see it, 4 alternatives of what we do with single lot exemption. We've learned through our initial discussion of the single lot exemption that if anyone has rights today under our unique version of the single lot exemption, and it is unique and it is an outlier, they will still have rights even if we repeal it or amend it. And that was determined by a case, an SJC case in the early 2000s, who were dealing with Orleans repeal of a very similar single lot exemption as ours 30 years after the fact. And So, that's going to require a study, but that's the ZBA's bailiwick. And, Woody certainly, when he was on the committee, had a lot of thoughts about this. I would like to take that particular article and first sub it out to ZBA to look at, since it's all under their jurisdiction.
But again, Tom, I'm sorry, but we have done so much work on that one. We know that was a point of contention, and we received so much feedback from the community that just subbing that out and having another group run point with it in the dark, I feel like there needs to be, just kicking the can down to someone because we don't have time to do it. Like, we've already done so much work on that specific one. So I think there almost needs to be like a case study of what we learned, what work product did Woody and our team already do on that. And just to help ZBA. Otherwise, we're just gonna be stuck in no man's land again.
All right. First of all, most of the community comment was incorrect. And
That's not the point, right? That was the
Well,
voice of
it is-
opposition, and that voice of opposition won. So we need to use that feedback, and we need to use that effectively if we want to be an effective group, right? So I'm not saying that I don't want ZBA's help. I just think that the work product and all the feedback, we need to bundle that up, unless everyone disagrees, but we need to use that in order to move forward. It would be my opinion.
It's understood, Cassie, and the version of new Article 7 has 4 alternatives for the single lot exemption that we haven't discussed, but which came out of those discussions and the reality of the law as it is. Again, this is something we wouldn't get to until preparations. We wouldn't get to this until the fall in preparations for the spring town meeting. I would just simply like Woody and his board to offer comments on it. The ultimate decisions on which choice to make and recommendations to make is going to be ours. It's not going to be the zoning board's. And I would, if the zoning board is going to discuss it, they're going to discuss it in an open meeting. It's not going to be secret or under the radar, but I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be guided by misinformed public opinion when people thought they were going to be impacted by the proposed change and were actually not in reality. We have research to do, that is to be sure, as to how many properties would be affected by a repeal or amendment.
I just think the amount of time that you spent personally talking to people saying why this would impact them, like that information should be used, because you spent so much of your time, and everyone, Lauren spent so much time with calls coming into town hall, wondering why they would be impacted and the property rights taken away. I just think that information needs to be bundled up in some type of package and be used so we can.
I think that you need to do that. I think one of the things is having a zoning board, a part of that is, number one, I've talked to Woody. He would be probably willing to work with you on that. We also would have Dave McMorris, who will be providing some services. But I think Cassie is right that we have to own that. And I think we have to have the select board, own that, be willing to speak up more than they had in the past.
You guys are jumping way. I don't disagree with anything that anybody
I know.
said.
I'm just trying to move on.
They're jumping way ahead in the process.
No, I just think if you're making the meeting minutes, Tom, let's just include that in there, that's part of the step there, right?
When this board discusses that article, which wouldn't be before the fall, I would like to already have the zoning board's comments in hand, as well as town council's. That's all I'm saying.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. The last issue of subbing out work is about climate resiliency. That's a topic the working group has talked about in a very generalized sense. The Harbor Committee is moving ahead with some forums that they've had on it. We have an existing floodplain overlay section of our bylaw, which probably comes into play. There is a model bylaw out there on climate resiliency that Jean Healy-Dippold has shared with me. So there's a lot of things to study. It's a question of who studies it. And again, ultimately it's going to come back to this to this committee, but again, I'm just thinking about subbing out some work to people who are more expert in this. I understand the Harbor Committee might be charged to take charge of dealing with the issue of climate resiliency. I understand that there has been some discussion of an outside expert, and I forget the name of some firm that I saw across some email. Lauren can speak to that. But again, this is going to require a certain amount of expertise that the 4 of us here, or the 7 of us that soon will be, are just not capable of doing alone. So again, when this changes related to climate resiliency and our floodplain, our existing floodplain bylaw would not come forward until spring 23. So we have the time, and I just think that, you know, we should if the Harbor Committee takes charge of this and an outside expert is retained, we should just piggyback on that and not try to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, Laura.
So I just want to add that this is the topic that Charlotte Pechtel, the conservation agent, and I attended a seminar in Worcester about climate resiliency bylaws analysis. So we do plan to work on that internally for some bit, and we can at least get us to a point where, you know, if a consultant is necessary at that point, we would have some more legwork to engage further. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm looking for, so that it isn't the 7 members of this committee who feel like they have to get into all the weeds on that kind of level of expertise. Whoever's looking at it, though, I'm just saying, look at our current floodplain bylaw and see if it needs change or needs to be integrated into that, because obviously the subject matters will overlap.
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the takeaways, and something that we noted is that there's so many pieces that are interrelated. So when you look at this resiliency, you can't really piecemeal it. You have to look at, you know, conservation bylaws, all the different pieces, the rules and regulations. So that is something that we are working on. But I just wanted to
Thanks
let
for
you know.
going to Worcester for that field trip.
I know. I was like, oh, remember when things used to be virtual? I missed that traffic. But anyway, that's just, I wanted to add that in for this topic.
My point and suggestion here is that that's going to be a particular topic of the bylaw where we're going to rely on some outside expertise before we get into crafting the actual bylaw language that results.
I think
all
Jean
right.
had her hand up.
Ooh, where is she? Is she here?
I'm right here.
Hello,
Hey,
Jean.
everyone.
Can't see you. Now I
I'm
see.
sorry to jump on late and jump off early, but I did want to say we've been talking about adding to this group in terms of members. And we do have some folks that, assuming that the select board agrees to appoint them, I think that could be helpful in this endeavor and possibly others, because it's just a huge amount of work for such a small amount of people.
Mhm.
And some of these folks have some pretty good expertise, including in other subjects that are not listed. And so it's not on the agenda, so we'll save it for another day. But I do think that we're trying to find people that can supplement with their skills and experience as well to help shoulder some of this burden.
Yeah, and Jean, I gave, at the beginning of the meeting, I gave a little bit of briefing of what we're doing, but that's very, very helpful. So I think that this group knows that we're going to be, you know, behind them, and we're going to give them the support they need.
All right. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
All right, so before I get to item 7, which I didn't put in here necessarily, because it would come up before town meeting, is a public forum. And so at the fall town meeting last December, we put forward a relatively innocuous definitional change to conform with state definitions. And we got I don't know, what's the proper word? We got mauled. And we did not prepare for that because frankly, with a somewhat innocuous definitional change, we didn't expect to get mauled, but we did. And we have known from the beginning that this would require public outreach in a forum where not like town meeting where you're presenting a finished article as a fait accompli, or to the planning board, even though that will be a public process. It again is dealing with an article that's written and is the main proposal. But to have a give and take with people in the town when you're doing something of this magnitude, and I want to believe they did it in 1955, and when the other major changes were made along the way. So we've always been talking about public outreach and public forums. And again, we made the effort to put out a bid. We got one response. It wasn't a really good response. So we're here doing it in-house. I'm long of the belief that this isn't rocket science to do a public presentation. But again, with the schedule necessary to be prepared for fall town meeting, the summer is not an optimum time to do this, but we have no choice but to get going on it. And particularly if we want to leave time for a second or even third public forum where we take in feedback from people and then we come back, because I envision this thing as being a presentation with feedback, questions, answers, town meeting without decisions, that there'll be discussion about this. And so a few months ago, I put together a slideshow for presentation, and looking to a date in August, my preferred, I thought about a Saturday. No, that's not going to work. It would have to be at a night, and to again avoid conflicts with some of the other boards, Monday or a Wednesday. So I was looking at either the 15th or the 17th of August, but since staff has to run the Zoom meeting, there may be a problem with that time. And I think Cassandra and I were talking now about August 5th, which isn't far away, obviously. The forum itself would be live at Wilcott Commons. I'd have to have my computer hooked up for the slideshow. It would be also on Zoom, so it might be the first test case of our hybrid model. And and then it would be on 143 TV as well. And whether it's on Facebook live streaming is up to whoever runs Facebook live streamings. But that needs to get going, so that we can start getting some meaningful public feedback and have time to react to it. And then, like I said, have a second or third forum if we need to, before we get to the planning board hearings in October. We have to have warrant articles ready, probably late September, Lauren, I would guess. I guess that's
yes, because you need to have the warrant, you need to have physical text in place to be able to advertise the public hearing notices to say, they're available at
right.
X
And there's things I need to add to the drafts of those articles that I've done, but we're more than halfway there in doing that. But
Tom, I'm sorry to interject. Do you mind if I just jump in real quick with something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Notice and comment. This is what we do at the Fed and the state government when you do proposed regulations of any significance. We are about to have an update on our website. We can build in a notice and comment process that I think will go a huge long way.
Good idea.
Helping put information out, pull information back in a way that really makes this transparent, identifies feedback from people, including those who are going to have a potentially, sophisticated campaign against certain areas. We want to know and see what people think are the flaws, as well as what people also think are good. And so, and I apologize for jumping in. That to me is something that really needs to happen, but I'm curious as to your thoughts. And, I know it's not on the agenda, but I want to put it out there because that's something we would probably need to build into a website upgrade we're trying to do right now, and we'll build it in sooner too, depending on your timeline.
All right, well, let me say this about that, my favorite phrase. The planning board, and I pointed this out to Jack, I will boast that we probably have the best page of all the boards in town because we post everything. We post all the application materials, comments, all of our present applications. Anybody can find anything they want about what we're up to. I know you're looking at a whole complete overhaul of the whole town website, but in the interim, there's certainly no reason we can't set up a page for the working group and similarly put things out there and post things as we do with planning board things. Obviously, we can't, nothing gets hidden from the public. And as we talk about these things, on the planning board, we're already facing at least one application for a zoning freeze. As word gets out, those who are inclined to develop are going to seek zoning freezes. And that's just, unfortunately, it's just that happens. We can't, but I have no problem putting all of this out in public, including the current drafts, which at the moment are just mine and haven't been commented on by town council or the members of this committee yet. We're going to start that next week, but I don't have a problem doing that. And I think Lauren and I can get that all, Cassandra, we can all get that set up using the planning board page as our model, but it does create, like finding the agenda for this meeting, for example, was under the master plan committee's page. Well, yeah, we're going to need a separate page and we're going to have materials to attach to it. But I have no problem setting up an online comment function or capability, but I think the in-person is necessary and want to go forward with this next month. But I just was remiss in putting that in the agenda to even discuss that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of the idea of this public forum and why we wanted to do it. And it's something we planned for a long time. We just need to get it done. And so going back to the agenda article, we'll get to assignments. The public forum is part of the assignments for the next meeting. Our item 7, the proposed town meeting timeline. So again, the idea is, even though nothing progressed at the most recent town meeting, is to keep on track to getting this done by spring 23. So nobody needs to comment on it right now, but I'd like you to take a look at it. There's 12 articles proposed for the fall. I have named them, whether they are a reorganization step or a substantive change. As I said, there are some things that are substantive that would be proposed for the fall, just because there are some issues of immediate import, such as height in the harbor, such as perhaps introducing buffer zoning into the village. You could say that renaming the districts is a substantive change. It's more of a reorganization change, but there's that. And then in the spring, you could have up to 13 articles, as I see it. It could be less, it could be more. It depends on how many of the real substantive changes we end up wanting to adopt and go forward with. It's very possible that we could decide that we don't want to make any real substantive change and just reorganize and do housekeeping and clean it up. That's fine. It certainly needs that. But, so it's a lot of articles, but again, there's different steps and you just can't do things in broad brushes. You have to be very specific on what you're changing and where you're changing it. These warrant articles are written the way they are. They're fine. There's some material that would need to be added to them, explanatory of what a new article would look like or a new chart would look like. That can be added by the time this goes to the warrant. But I want everybody to look at it. And again, it's an aggressive schedule, and I am going to ask the powers that be that we have a separate night for these. I don't think we can sit on one Monday night and let's say December's town meeting has 20 other articles, like the last one was fairly short. We're not going to deal with 20 other articles and then also deal with a dozen zoning articles. So, both for December and for next May, I am going to ask the powers that be that, prepare to have a separate session for the zoning articles just because of the volume of it. that's sort of put forward to keep on track. Now, there's always unforeseen things that come up. There may be articles that are defeated that we have to rework. So, will it all get done by spring 23? Who knows? But in trying to keep that to that original schedule, this is what I put together as a proposal to discuss.
Tom, to address that, one thing that might be effective for the use of your board's or time and the select board is a kind of a joint meeting. It's not really a joint meeting because you're a creation of the select board. And then we could do that, have a public meeting and presentation of the select board and discussion in one meeting. Would that be effective?
Yeah, I mean, if you can squeeze in, well, first of all, the next meeting would be the first meeting of a reconstituted board. So I'd like to run it all by them, and the public forum, I just added a slide about discussing a tentative town meeting schedule, only because I just created the tentative town meeting schedule. It's not critical to that first public forum that we go into that level of detail of what's going to be presented when. So, anytime I think before September, before we have the warrant and have to act on the warrant, we can discuss how much goes forward and how much doesn't.
I would say that we before we had that before the select board, you really want to be well along to what you're going to recommend. I think.
Yeah, no, I know. So and by early September, we should be. So
good. So that would be, and I think the select board has come to realize that to do the things that need to be done on this venue and others, we're going to be having, already having another, meeting tomorrow night. We had one last week. We've really come to terms with the fact that we're going to be having a lot of meetings. And we're also looking at those meetings to do a dual purpose in that when we are informed as the select board, because it's a public meeting, we're hoping that will also serve to inform the public.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get all that together. And you're the only one, since you're on this committee, who has seen all the materials I have gathered for going forward. And this is all based on past work, and I've just organized them in my computer with just the stuff going forward. And, if you want me to distribute that to the other members of the select board, I'm fine with doing that. I can do that tomorrow.
I think you can.
It's a lot of material. Maybe not the.
Put a link if it's on your website.
Well, that's not set up. I'll tell you what I'll do. I think the select board members don't need to see the individual articles yet. They're not participating. I can send them the proposed town meeting schedule. I can send them the table of contents. I could send them the orientation memo that I circulated, which explains where we are and what we're planning to do. And that'll give everybody at least, a high level sense of what's going on.
Good.
Tom, even a part of that, would it be worth taking a piece of the RFP that provided background on why we're doing what we're doing? I feel like there's language in there that said why we had to reorganize, why we wanted to rewrite.
Well, the public forum, if you look at the slides, I mean, the introductory public forum is to at first be very by the way, what I'm proposing is to start a meeting on either a Monday or Wednesday night in August at 7:00 and be done no later than like 8:39 or at 6:30, nothing more than 2 hours. I'm not trying to overwhelm people, but that's why I want to build in enough time for enough forums in case we need more time. It's going to be hard to cover those 30 slides, which is, the mile-high overview of the whole process, and not have questions and and get off track. But
okay.
I think in those slides, not only do I give a background on the history of the zoning bylaw in Cohasset and the state, the history of when the history of when major substantive changes to the bylaw were made, and
maybe that part can be abridged because we're just moving
and
forward. Right?
I've also, put forth a slide to explain why we're doing this. So, and that's out. So, you know, and again, the first public forum is really an overview of how you looking at the rewrite, what it's going to entail, what it could entail. It's not really to discuss substance to the extent people want to discuss substance. Anyway, so
Hey,
item 8.
Tom, on the draft presentation, some of the article numbers jumped around. It went like 4, 6, 7, and then
That's
and
because,
5 was at the end. Was that done intentionally
yes.
for,
Yeah.
so it jives with
Well,
what's planned for fall town meeting and what's planned for spring town meeting?
yeah, somewhat in that, because Article 5 of the new bylaw is, I believe it's the akin to Article 5 of the current bylaw. That's the table of area regulation. And that is where, you know, that's the part of the bylaw that hasn't been substantively changed since 1986. And that is where, if we are going to make any kind of significant, I won't use the word radical, but significant change to the bylaw, that's where it will happen. And it is a topic that's not going to be discussed until spring 23. And if again, and I emphasize the word if to anybody who's listening, we propose any changes to the table. But it also can be the most controversial, because the committee has discussed in a very general way frontage. We've discussed height, at least
Right.
specific,
There's a lot of content there.
at least specifically as to the harbor, and we've discussed the issue of house size. And that's where these changes would be made. So, you know, in the public presentation, I was trying to get through the less controversial stuff first and then deal with the last one. So that's why Article 5 is taken out of order in the public presentation. I could change it, but then it would sidetrack from some other stuff. So anyway, so item 8, next steps. So by the time we meet again, the selectmen will have reconstituted, the select board will have reconstituted this committee however it sees fit. On the next meeting, as would have been our next meeting had we continued right on straight through from April, we were going to discuss the new Article 1 of the bylaw. In the reorganization of this, it's not too radically different than what we have, but when I do this, if I do, bylaws for a corporation or for an operating agreement for an LLC, any kind of organic document, what it is, what it's doing, who's doing it, and then the substance of the bylaw, and then an amendment process tacked on to the end. So Article 1 is our existing Article 1, which is just the general explanation of what the bylaw is. Article 3, which is the process of amending the bylaw. And Article 12, which is more administrative stuff, which somehow, rather than being at the front of our existing bylaw, got put at the end at Article 12. I think Article 12 was the original endpoint. Maybe it was Article 13. Article 12 describes the duties of the zoning board, the planning board, and the building inspector. And it's where our enforcement language is. And there was a project we had a year ago with an after the fact filings that I was hot to trot on giving these people a big penalty, and hot to trot on the planning board and the zoning board having their own independent authority to issue fines and discipline and enforcement, just like Concom can. Come to find out through town council that we cannot do that under state law. The only enforcement authority is the building inspector. So the changes in that respect and the text is to try to simplify and make clearer the enforcement process. What's a violation? What's the standard to show a violation, and what the enforcement tools are. And when you look at the draft of Article 1, I have marginal notes of what's changing. The fine, for example, bringing up to the state law maximum of $300 a day rather than $100. Concom has 300 a day, we don't. So everything's pointed out there. The processes of what a site plan review is, what a special permit is, what a variance is, unchanged from the existing. It's just a lot of the new Article 1 is a consolidation of 3 articles and just reorganization. It's in the enforcement part of the bylaw that there is some substantive change. Again, everything is noted in the margins where there is substantive change. This part of the bylaw would also add as a process, in addition to special permit, site plan review, and variance, the idea of demolition delay, which has been talked about in this town for 20 years. So we can either say, let's do it, let's not do it. There's a clarification on waiver. We have so many applicants come in and say, well, can you waive this section of the bylaw? No, we can't. There's no process for waiver. And the proposed language is just to reaffirm that, to make it clear to the applicants of the world. So assignment for next week is to look at that Article 1 and let's discuss those changes and let's get an article under our belt. It's, again, since it's mostly reorganizational, it would be on schedule to be presented at the fall town meeting. Since the slideshow would also be, the public forum would be coming up perhaps as early as August 5th, I'd also like everybody to look at the slides and critique that, and let's get those into shape.
Sorry, Tom, which email is that with the PowerPoint?
Well, you got an email a week or so ago with everything
From you or Cassandra?
from me.
In there.
So you got a zillion documents attached to it because I couldn't attach them in any other, I don't know how to zip things. And so you've got an attachment to that email
Okay.
from a couple of weeks
Got it.
ago.
Yep.
That shows Article 1 as a standalone document to look at. And then you'll see the PowerPoint presentation, which is the slideshow. So for our next meeting, I'd like those two be prepared to discuss the substance of those two things.
It was the 27th of June at
The 20th,
Oh, I got it. Yep.
Yeah.
17
Yeah.
attachments.
Tom, it's
Laura.
Lauren.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know you're on your phone, so I just in terms of dates, I just want to, just a couple of clarification points. You mentioned August 5th, that's a Friday. We were actually looking at August 8th, which is a Monday for the forum.
all right, yeah, I knew the 15th and 17th were out, so August 8th is even better, you know. the
Yeah,
more
so that was a Monday. And then just as I'm looking again, cross comparing our agenda for tonight, we have for our following meeting taking place scheduled August 10th. That's actually the planning board's only August meeting. So we're gonna have to revisit that next meeting date, but you and I can talk offline and update folks by our next meeting on July 20th, if that makes more sense.
Yeah, well, then we'd probably do the 17th. Anyway, yeah, you and I will talk offline about that. But for looking ahead to that, the next meeting of this committee, other than the public forum, which will intervene in between the two, would then be to look at Article 2, which is the definitions. And I will tell you that when you look at the draft, it is very different from the existing. I believe I have a document that has a side-by-side comparison. Perhaps not, but I certainly have a document of the existing definitions. But again, the thought about the reorganization of the definitions is first and foremost to consolidate all the definitions that are now spread throughout the bylaw because of add-on articles over the years into one place, into Article 2. And Article 2 is where our existing definitions are. And the thought was the thought in the organization of this new Article 2 is to break the definitions down into categories of definitions, again, in the hope of making it more user-friendly and easier to work with than simply a straight alphabetical list of definitions. If you do, when we get to that point and you compare the old and the new, a lot of things are eliminated, particularly from the add-on articles, because in the law we operate, we don't have to define every term every word on the planet Earth. We we have a principle called that definitions are according to their plain and ordinary meaning or according to their context in their particular trade or field. So I wanted to incorporate that. There's still a lot of definitions. The definitions tie to the new table of uses, and we can get into the theory behind that later. But the exercise that our committee had previously started on a little bit, but not too deep, is to look at our existing definitions. What do we need? What don't we need? What can we get rid of? And then the new proposed definitions engages in that exercise, but then it also reorganizes them in a format, again, by category, to make it perhaps more user-friendly to read. So that would be the target, and that's a lot to look at the definitions, and that would be the target for our second meeting. And then beyond that, before September, our Article 3 is our districts, and the proposal is really just consolidating and renaming some commercial districts, but no changes to the residential districts. And Article 4 is the table of uses, the table of use regulations. And the underlying theory of that is to simplify it. We have an absolute laundry list of uses. And, you know, as Woody pointed out, sometimes very fine hairs are split. And the dog business across from Stop and Shop had to go to land court because we had some dog uses allowed, but we didn't have that particular dog use allowed. So the theory behind the table of uses is to go to more broad, generalized categories, since with respect to commercial development, given our location, we want to encourage commercial development and have that be a part of our tax base. But we're kind of in my words, the beggars can't be choosers mode, and we have to be flexible. And, you know, a couple of town meetings ago, we brought back the use variance, which brings back more flexibility in dealing with uses, but you'll see that the table is much more simplified than what we have today. And
Tom,
yeah.
I took a look at your draft table of use regulations, and compared to the use regulations that we currently have, there's 10 zones. Looks like you've got 15. Can you send us what those acronyms are? I mean, I could guess at most of them, but I'd rather not guess if you have the acronym.
Zoning districts, you mean?
Yeah, you've got 15.
Yeah, okay. Well, look at Article 3. Article 3 is the zoning district articles.
Oh, is it defined there? Okay.
Oh, yeah. So in looking at this schedule, we get to the end of August and have looked through Articles 1 through 4. We will be in a position then to bring forward the articles, the 12 articles that are proposed for all town meetings, since again, they are mostly reorganizational related. There are going to be, a few articles in the fall proposed that are substantive change. For example, height in the harbor. For example, possibly bringing the idea of buffer zoning to the village. And what that means is on 3A, we already have a provision that creates a buffer between the residential district and the commercial district. And the commercial development can only come so close to the residential district. And the thought has been raised about doing something similar like that to the village, not prohibiting development up to the property line, the district boundary line, but maybe having different setback and other requirements there. So it's a thought, and it's a new thought that the working group up until this point hasn't discussed at all. But we will be in a position by the beginning of September to have these articles done.
Just a heads up, I have an 8 o'clock that I have.
Yeah, I gotta run too. So I wanted to wrap it up. I mean, we're at the end point. So but I want people to be prepared that the workload is going to be pretty intense for, through till next spring town meeting. So we're going to be meeting regularly every other week, hopefully, and having some public forums and formal presentations to other boards that we have to squeeze in between everything. So,
And by the way, everybody keep in mind, when you see things that an outside expert can solve very quickly, rather than having all of you use your valuable time to hash it back and forth, you can let Lauren know or let me know, and we'll get that information for you. We do not want you've got a lot to do. We don't want you being bogged down in minutia. So if there's expertise that you need, notice, Lauren, how I volunteer you. But anyway, keep that in mind, because this is a lot of work, and the town is very grateful for the effort that you're putting in, by the way.
And as far as I go, I'm not big into titles and anything. I'm calling myself the quarterback at the moment, because I've written all this stuff, and one of the, with Jack and Cassie, last man standing on our committee. So if no one objects, I'll just continue to quarterback and set this up. But I will hand off the ball frequently.
Good. Okay.
All right. So without anything else, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, and thank you all for taking the time tonight to be here, and hopefully see you all on the 20th.
Motion to adjourn.
Anyone second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. All opposed? Hearing none. Thank you again, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. I will circulate a follow-up that town council will be copied on, and I will add as attachments just those two pieces of two documents that are for discussion for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.